Yo, BJ Gaddour with the Daily BJ. I've got my morning coffee. I'm trying to prep myself to answer this question because, along with what do I think about intermittent fasting and how to lose belly fat, this is the most commonly asked question I get. What do I think about keto? And obviously, there was a catchy photo that tried to get you to look and learn more about this and see what I had to say. But one of the things that I think is really important is to take yourself outside of what you're currently doing. I needed this many times along the way in my health and fitness journey. An example I can think of is a friend of mine was actually doing the keto diet. He was seeing some great results, but we were hanging out at his house one time, and both of us have obsessive personalities. So it's one of those things where, a good thing can be a bad thing when overdone, or it takes over your life, right? So I saw he was like going to to pee on these strips to see if he was in ketosis, to be able to make sure he was doing his diet correctly. And I said to him, you don't need to pee on those strips to lose weight, right? And he looks at me and he goes, really? And, it's one of those moments where I think, look, this is the problem with the whole space of health and fitness. Everybody has to create something that is different enough that catches your attention, because there's so much out there and no one wants to hear that it really is just about finding a plan that's sustainable for you. That's number one. If it's not sustainable, it's questionable. But it's sustainable for you, that locks in a general level of calories that supports your weight loss or muscle gain goals based on what that is for you, whatever goals you're looking at, gets enough total protein intake, and then you're figuring out from there how much of the rest of your diet is going to be fat or carbohydrate, and a lot of that's based on body type and goal. So the first thing I want to touch on, you don't need to be keto to benefit from a lower carbohydrate diet. Huge misconception that way. Ketogenic diets, look, and I'm not talking about the health situations. There are certain health conditions, medical conditions, where a ketogenic diet actually can be life-changing. I'm talking about healthy individuals looking to lose weight in a long-term way. Short-term, I've done keto. I've done the extreme, like super low-carb diets. In the short term, I don't think any diet is better for rapid fat loss. It's incredibly effective. Long term, it can be a fucking disaster, because what happens, and I shared this before, where I gained 35 pounds in 5 days after going super low carb, keto style. By the way, as obsessive as I may have been, I still never peed on those piss strips. That's just crazy. Like, if we have to do that to be healthy, something's wrong, in my opinion. But it sets your body up for, you lose what's called metabolic flexibility. You lose your body's ability to tolerate carbohydrate. And then when you reintroduce it, your body loses control. And your body is primed to store as much fat as possible from carbohydrate. I also feel that it puts you in a situation where you're forced to start looking at carbohydrate as the enemy. And that's bad, because we can't allow ourselves to just make any sort of food an enemy. And I've gone through that the last decade, like even at times like worrying about fruit making me fat and things like that. And that all stemmed from going too hard, too long, and really low carbohydrate diets, and just forgetting about the fact that, yeah, it really is about overall calories and finding, which balance of fat and carbohydrate is best for you so you can stick with it. So it's really important to understand that you don't have to go keto. You don't have to go 30 grams of carbohydrate or less a day. In fact, in a lot of cases, you're gonna lose metabolic flexibility, and metabolic flexibility is key. You want to be able to use both fat and carbohydrates for fuel. That's the goal. You use more fat at lower intensities, you use more carbohydrate at higher intensities, and you're always using a mix of the two no matter what you're doing. And if we shut down our body's ability to get familiar with one of the two, primary energy sources for our body, you're not going to feel good. Your performance will suffer. And again, don't forget too, a lot of the people you might know that have, first of all, have you ever known someone who's been on keto for more than a year that isn't selling a ketogenic product or isn't taking ketogenic supplements because they're having trouble, getting it done because it's so difficult? So you have to ask yourself that. Number two, you don't have to panic about your carbohydrate amounts. Really what it becomes, that's why I talk about the protein and produce lifestyle. Produce, fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates. They're just the lower impact carbohydrate options with the highest nutrient density, the most fiber, the most antioxidants, They don't require as much tracking because you tend to get filled up pretty quickly on fruits and vegetables, and they have the most benefits, right? So eating just, if 80% of your meals are protein and produce based, it's going to be a lower carbohydrate diet. It's still not going to be keto because you're going to probably get, and you want to get about 100 plus grams a day of fruit and vegetable carbohydrate for health, performance, everything else. But that alone, for most people, you cut out liquid calories, the sugars, you don't have any added sugar in your diet, and you eat mostly meals of protein and produce, it'll make a huge difference in your life and your body composition. Then you look at also from a produce standpoint, and I've posted it, by the way, to this video, is the produce pyramid. So you can customize also the type of fruits and vegetables you're eating to get less carbohydrate or more, right? So fruit will have more carbohydrate, vegetables will have less. And reference that pyramid. And then you look at the other piece of it, even within vegetables, right? You've got starchier vegetables like potatoes, but then you also have really high fiber, low carbohydrate vegetables like green vegetables, broccoli, spinach, Brussels sprouts. So if you want to burn more fat or cut a little carbohydrate out without, going so hardcore keto, zero carb, low carb, just eat more green vegetables and then cut out the starches or save the starches for higher carb days. And that's the next point. Carb cycling. Carb cycling is genius because it allows you to access the fat burning benefits of a lower carbohydrate diet without the pitfalls of prolonged low carb dieting. After about 5 days for most people of really low carb, you can start to lose some thyroid function a little bit. Your metabolism can slow, and your body will start to fight you. So by incorporating regular carb cycling, meaning higher carb days, lower carb days, whether it be the classic example, which means on like heavy resistance training days, you have a higher carb meal post-workout or just a higher carb day in general. And then maybe on cardio or rest days, lower intensity training days, it's a lower carb day to emphasize more fat burning. And by cycling things in that way, you give your body, something that's more difficult to adapt to, right? You're changing things up, and that can help a lot with progress. You're also not going crazy because you're never more than a couple of days away from a higher carb day. And then the other option too, that I'm a big fan of as well, is lower carb weekdays, higher carb weekends, within moderation, right? We don't want to kill it on the weekends, but in most cases, when you have a higher carb day, you have to start mixing in lower carb days, unless you, and yes, calories are important, but what I have found with my members, myself, if you want to be lean year round, and you want to still enjoy, higher carb days, it's really important to mix in the lower carb days so that your body doesn't store fat. And your body also on the lower carb days, it will tend to use more fat for fuel. And you want your body to be able to do that. A lot of people struggle with that because they have so much carbohydrate all the time. And then if they go to maybe a lower carb day and they're like, oh, I feel terrible. But it's because your body is not fat adapted. It's not used to using fat for fuel because you're always having so many carbohydrates. So it's an important thing to touch on. This is a long video, but look, I have to break all this down for you because it's not as simple as, is keto bad, is keto good? Keto can be effective. If keto is what you enjoy and you can stick with, awesome. Most people can't. And I think in most cases, it will set you up for a situation where carbohydrates become the enemy, you become very obsessive, and anything that requires you to piss on a strip and get urine on your hands to see if you're doing it right, that is a perfect example of, is this really necessary? If it's not sustainable, it's questionable. You don't need to go keto to benefit from a lower carbohydrate diet. I hope this helped. Please share this with a soulmate or someone who's curious about how to lose weight because I don't want you guys to go crazy. It doesn't have to be this hard. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Love you guys. Peace.